Now, more of Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute, the only show directly addressing the problems and solutions for Illinois. Now, from AM 560, here's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back on this edition of Illinois Rising. My co-host, Austin Berg, writer, Illinois Policy Institute, IllinoisPolicy.org. Also, Hollywood Could Be Beckoning. The writer credit on the Madigan documentary that's been so talked about over the last 60 days or so. Before we get to the vote on Speaker, your assessment of the Madigan documentary and how it was received, and of course, of how your writing was received.
Well, I'm biased, but I'd like to say it was a smash hit, Dan. It was interesting to see
the Aaron Sorkin of the right. That's actually an insult. No, I'm going to come up with better.
Our dialogue is
Paul
a little
Haggis
bit better
of the right. Yes,
but we'll have I had a ton of radio and TV interviews for that documentary, and I think the most interesting thing that developed is you saw kind of a splintering between inside and outside media in Illinois. So everyone covered it. People would say this is a must-see if you're involved in Illinois politics. But then you'd have the guys who've been writing about this stuff for 40 years saying, yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong in it, but there's nothing new. As if explaining a vast patronage web, a property tax scheme that he makes millions of dollars on, him drawing the map, him controlling the legislative process at every turn, that's just old news, nothing to see here. I've been seeing this stuff for 40 years, so it's not that big of a deal to me.
Well, it's telling, right? So what they're saying is they're inured to it.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. And so, the other thing that's funny about this, too, is they pretend that they're just scriveners. Yeah. They're just writing what's happening here. So, yes, we've documented what's happened. But in point of fact, they're participants in what has happened and continues to happen.
If not active participants, then willing participants, and help reinforce that this is just status quo in Illinois, that the Attorney General is the daughter of the Speaker, that's whatever. And you really saw that in some of the news coverage. And then other news coverage was, wow, this is something everyone should see because not everyone has seen a portrait of the Speaker put together in this way. And it is really shocking when you get an hour-long portrait of someone who's amassed this much power and you delve into that political culture, and it just happens to be that an outgrowth of that political culture is a media class that doesn't really want to deal with it, honestly. So I think we saw actually in the elections, you saw a total rebuke of Madigan in a state where you had the Republican nominee get less than 40% of the vote, in a state where you had Madigan draw the map himself. He lost 4 seats in the House.
Yeah, not in the suburbs in suburban Cook County, though. And the problem is that's where 60% of the people live.
Right.
So you've got that ongoing challenge. Speaking of the challenge, though, in the seats that he lost, 4 in the House and 2 in the Senate, which kind of by extension are his because John Cullerton is just sort of one of his henchmen, even though he's the Senate president. The prospect that there may be some Democrats who are sufficiently chastened by the outcome of the November 8th election at the legislative level, that they will take a pass on Madigan for that all-important speaker vote come January in the seating of the new House and Senate. There's we've had Democratic candidates in the past say, I'm going to vote against the speaker if I'm elected. Most of them were not elected, so we never had that chance.
Wonder why.
But even the idea of voting present or taking the additional step of voting against the speaker, even though he will retain his speakership, that's going to be a fait accompli. But any message senders in the Democrat caucus that would then signal again, maybe Madigan doesn't have the iron fist that he had prior to November 8th.
Yeah, no one's voted present on the speaker vote in 30 years. And when that happened, Martino was the rep, not the Martino we know today, his father. He was immediately stripped of his committee chairmanship. So Democrats know what happens if they go against him. The people who lost during the election, you have his House Assistant Majority Leader, John Bradley. He's voted for the speakership 6 times. Mike Smitty, he's voted for the speakership twice for Madigan. Clunan voted for Madigan twice. I think that this could easily become the toughest vote these people have to have in the 100th General Assembly for some of them.
But now the flip side is those people that are outgoing legislators that lost on November 8th also received 7 figures worth of support from Mike Madigan. So it wasn't like Mike Madigan didn't try to do everything he could to salvage them. There just was no salvaging them in these districts.
And I think that's part of the fear, right? And if you have people in districts going out seeing this movie or signing petitions on IllinoisPolicy.org to vote for someone else for speaker, I think there's a real fear that people see this guy's name as being toxic. And you have to go back to your district and explain why you voted for him for speaker. And I think that's something that voters should be conscious of. Why is the speaker vote important? Where does Madigan get his power? He's not like any of these other state reps. Why is that? These are very simple questions that I think people are starting to open their eyes to, and this vote will be the culmination of that come early January.